Hello and welcome to Find Your Freedom, a podcast dedicated to helping you truly find freedom in all aspects of life. Join your hosts and their expert guests as they share practical tips and strategies for finding more freedom in your life. It's time to take control of your life and create the future you want. Let's find your freedom. Here are your hosts, Lenny the Boss and Omid Rad Investor.
We are back with another super exciting episode of Find Your Freedom. And listen, we have a doctor in the house. But before we go there, right, we have something absolutely free for you. And we want you to go to this site and download it. It's free. Go to www.findyourfreedomrei.com/freedom kit. Absolutely free. Believe me, it would change your life. Or www.findyourfreedomrei.com/freedom kit. All right. Now, with that being said, let's get on to why you are here, right? So, the guest we have today, which she's going to go from a guest to a friend because we don't have any guests here, Find Your Freedom. So she's a privilege to lead clients on a path of growth that eliminates your entrepreneur overwhelming, brings clarity to your business or businesses, right? Oh, I love that. Bring clarity to your business or businesses. And, she makes sure that you have your growth, your momentum, and provide you just with the framework to keep your priorities. I love everything about that. So, Dr. Sheri, how you doing? How you feeling?
Amazing. And Lenny, that was a mouthful that you just said. Ultimately, to break it down into one sentence, I am a real estate investor and a high performance coach and psychologist. And I help real estate investors really dial in their strategy and what they're doing so it actually meets their life goals.
There you go. Boom,
There we
boom,
go.
boom, boom, boom. That's how you, one sentence. I think Omid, so Omid was on stage teaching this, right? So he looking like, Lenny, really? But he was on stage back, we was in Orlando. He was teaching the one pitch on having that one line to come on stage. He was bringing everybody on stage to come online and have their one pitch. Some people just was giving like a whole book, right? And other people was doing it exactly how Omid was teaching it, right? So I don't know. You must have went to Omid class or something like that.
Same page. It's all good.
There you go. I love it. Love the simplicity. You got to make it easy.
Gotta
make it easy. But hey, we're excited to have you here today, and we know that you have some fantastic things to talk about. But before we jump into that, for the audience and the listeners, can you just give them just some background about yourself?
Absolutely. So I was born no, I won't go back that far. So my first career, quote unquote career, is as a psychologist. And so I joined the military. I was military psychologist for about 5 years. And during that time, my husband and I learned about real estate investing. I have a sister. She was starting to invest in Seattle. She was living in a fourplex and rehabbing it. It was just crazy time for her. But amazingly, she convinced us that real estate investing is something to consider. And so we considered it. We started going to some local meetups and found wow, this actually could be a really good thing for us. And we just jumped in. And so that was 16 years ago that we bought our first investment property and have been slow and steady for probably the next 13 years. And then the last 3 years, we're like, well, let's have some fun. Because everybody said that during COVID, right? It was amazing for so many reasons. So it's just been a journey of growth, of testing things out, of having some challenges that I'm sure we'll end up talking about, and just trying to be better through it all.
No, that's really cool. I think it's you start. I like how you blended psychologist, serving in the military, real estate, performance, and now it's all blending together. So I think that's really cool. And so you have a unique perspective. So I really want to kind of dig into that a little bit. But first, military, psychologist, military. I mean, I'm sure you're dealing with a certain demographic. Walk us through even just some of those kind of experiences that you've gone through and the learning lessons that you've had just doing that.
Oh my gosh. The majority of the folks that I worked with as in the Air Force were challenges around two things. One is they were new airmen away from home for the first time in their life. And they, not everybody was as good as adjusting away from home. And so you had some that were like, I can't handle this. And they were looking for ways to get out of the military. And sometimes they would come to mental health and we would usher them out because they just weren't a good fit. But the other part that I was able to do, which was much more meaningful, and that's work with the soldiers, the airmen that had been deployed and were now struggling when they came back home, struggling to engage with their family again, struggling to find meaning in the kind of what they felt as the mediocre work they were doing at home, because that was not as significant as the work that gets done when you're deployed typically. So I had the privilege of really being able to really understand what that mindset and the challenges look like with that as a psychologist.
Wow. I wasn't prepared for that.
Lenny is speechless.
Yeah, I mean, well, I have a brother-in-law, and he before he went to the army, before he went to the army, everything in his head was great, right? Went to the army, got deployed to, I forgot what war it was, and he was combat. So he was boots on the ground, and he mentioned some very disturbing things that got done, and because of those things, his head wasn't in the right place, and he struggled to today. Much better, like you probably won't even notice, but family, will. So I know a little bit about this, but I mean, how do you deal with these people? Like I sometimes I talk to my brother-in-law, and I'm just a regular person, right? I don't know, but like, what are those conversations like? Like, what do you actually do to help these individuals to outside of medication?
Yeah, now that's a great question. And medication will only go so far. Just and it's a couple things. One is the body has been conditioned to respond a certain way. So part of it is literally just the reconditioning of one's physiological response to things. And then the counterpart to that is how to reinterpret the symptoms, the experiences, and life going forward in a way that's meaningful. So when we look at something having happened as that was wrong and bad, well, how do we deal with that? How do we integrate that into our life if something was wrong or bad? So if we can look at that as an opportunity that allows us to grow, maybe it still wasn't a good thing that happened, but if we can somehow figure out how can that thing that happened allow me to grow and change, but into a person that I admire or that I want to become even more, it's that arc that becomes so powerful. And quite frankly, as a psychologist, I didn't fully understand that. It wasn't until I shifted into high performance coaching and got trained as a high performance coach that I really understood it isn't just about resolving past trauma or any of that sort of thing to become normal again. Rather, it's how do we use that to harness it into the future? So it's that future perspective that I think that for me was completely missing in my training and how I was interacting with airmen and folks with PTSD. So I've carried that now out of the traditional mental health field, working with entrepreneurs and real estate investors. And a large part of what I do is help them focus on what is your future. And the reason this is so important with real estate investors is because we are spending so much time, energy, and money building out this future. If we're not super intentional in understanding what that future should look like for us, then we can completely miss the boat. So an example of that, for folks here who are doing short-term rentals or something like that, that's a very heavy lift. Typically, especially if you are involved in the day-to-day operations, with most real estate investors are. I have 8 short-term rentals right now. And there are a lot of management. We get these messages. I mean, I have an assistant that does these now, but sometimes I still get pulled in. Like, she gets messages at all times of the night, like, my internet went out, or there's a bug in the bathtub, or stupid, like, sometimes it's really stupid. But if you're managing that, but your goal with real estate investing is to be able to have more time freedom, that might actually be counterproductive. So that's just an example of how critical it is to understand what your future goals are. What are you really working towards yourself and your family, so that your strategy with real estate investing aligns with that and doesn't take you off course.
No, so what I'm hearing is a lot of kind of like what you did before in those sort of scenarios was kind of redefining how you what people experienced. And so what I'm kind of curious about is now that's kind of translating into the high performance and dealing with entrepreneurs. So let's just say that the average person, let's say they did a W-2 and they were successful in their job, and now they're transitioning into entrepreneurship. It's their first time. So let's just say I'm speaking like through experience, and then I'm going through all the struggles as an entrepreneur, because I was so used to killing it and outperforming everybody, and now you start from the bottom and start all over. But entrepreneurship is a very different game. And so
100%.
how do you, I guess, like with the strategies, how do you set those entrepreneurs up for success so that they're looking at the right things and putting their time in the right places?
Great question. And I would say entrepreneurship is much more trauma ridden than being an employee. Because, one day you're like, oh my gosh, I just had a sales call. I just sold somebody. I'm killing it. Like, you're feeling on top of the world. You got the adrenaline running, and then the next day you're like, oh my God, like your website broke, or, you just talked with you're cold calling, and then you get hangups.
Oh, true.
It's like, you feel like you're bipolar. Like, one minute you're manic, the next minute you're depressed. And like, well, what? It's hard to make sense of that. So I would say that, first of all, that being an entrepreneur is there's far more trauma, quote unquote trauma, than being an employee. So there is actually some, kind of a relationship there to having gone through war. But if you're listening to this and have been like, I get it. I don't mean to. One is like your life is at risk. The other one feels like your life is at risk. It's probably not. But it's understanding that the challenges that we're experiencing, the ups and downs, that's actually grooming you and conditioning you to have more resilience and more strengths if you allow it to do it that way. And I mean, when I started, so I've been an entrepreneur since 2010. That's when I separated from the Air Force. I started a private practice in my town and built that for the next 9 years, and then sold it. And then pivoted entirely into high performance coaching, all the while real estate investing. And even when I was building my private practice, I didn't quite understand the ups and downs in the extremes as I do now, as I'm trying to be a coach and all of the marketing that requires. I mean, as a clinical psychologist, I got insurance, feeding clients to me. So that part wasn't challenging. So now I'm in an entirely different game, and it's challenging. And I have to coach myself almost every day of like, okay, Sheri, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or I don't. I have affirmations that I read every morning. And one of them, there are things like, my challenge today is going to be my blessing in the future. God doesn't give me more, or God only gives me what he needs for me to grow right now. So it's like this mindset of like, I appreciate the challenges now because I recognize that is the ground in which I'm going to grow. So it's this shift. And this is critical for entrepreneurs, because if we don't truly embody this perspective of growth, that's where we get frustrated, we get burnt out, we start feeling, what's the point? It's more of the journey than the destination. So that's one of the significant shifts that I think a successful entrepreneur can make, is to like, no, it's the journey. It's the journey. The journey is where the good stuff is.
It's all about the journey. And you're talking my love language when you talk about affirmations, So I'm a big, I'm a big affirmations guy, to the point where I had my son. He just turned 11 a week ago, and he has affirmations on his wall. He has 10. I printed out like 100, and I told him pick 10 out of it. We wrote it, and what he has to do is every morning he has to read it, and then we drew a like he took his hand and we drew like a hand on it. He gives himself a high five, at the end after he reads it.
Oh, I love that.
It might be more me giving the high fives than him, because at 11 he don't really want to read any of the affirmations, especially first thing in the morning. But I just believe that they are just so powerful, and just being in the habit and being exposed to them will just help with so many things that you can't even imagine. So, like I said,
Agreed.
definitely speaking my love language when it comes to this. Now, it's something I was reading on your site, right? And I wrote the acronym for it first. So it was CPMFJ. And what that stands for is clarity, purpose, meaning, fulfillment, and joy. So I'm like really loving you and everything about you as I was doing some research on you. And I'm like, but it was the one word for me that has really been very profound, maybe in the last 3 to 4 months in my life. And that's fulfillment. And I personally have been asking myself that question with just about everything that I'm doing these days. Am I being fulfilled? So can you talk a little bit just about, all the words: clarity, purpose, meaning, fulfillment, and joy? And if you want to, stay in a fulfillment bag a little bit, you're more than welcome.
Sure. Well, Lenny, let me ask you a question. What does fulfillment mean to you?
That's a great question. So for me, it's truly a feeling, so and I think that I'm in the process of kind of sort of defining it by continuously asking myself this question. And my wife might not like it. Let me make sure she's not looking. So my wife might not like it, right? But everything I'm doing these days, I'm asking, was I fulfilled with what I just did? Because as I'm getting older, I want to sit there and make sure that the time that I'm spending doing things are meaningful, right? And with that being said, I want to be I want to leave what I done, feeling a certain type of way. And as of today, that's what fulfillment means to me. When I leave this situation, or I did something, how did I feel after doing it? Did I feel complete? Did I feel happy? Did I feel satisfied? So that's how today I would define fulfillment.
So that's interesting. And I would say, part of me wants to say, well, there's no wrong definition. But Lenny, I would say that your perspective on fulfillment today is still in journey. And that's okay. And that's good.
Yes.
And the reason I recognize that it's still in journey is that feelings and emotions are fickle. They are impacted by things that sometimes we are completely unaware of. They're impacted by people we don't even know, or that were 30 years ago, they said something that caused us to think and believe something. And so fulfillment is very closely tied, or is a result of having clarity, having action that is in alignment with the clarity that we have. And the clarity is typically around our values. Like, what values do we have in life that drive us? And I sometimes I do a game with clients, and it's called a values sort. You can certainly Google that. It'll be a list of like 100 values or 89 values, whatever. And you go through this process of going through them, like eliminate the ones that are like, nah, I don't really care about that. Nah, I don't really care about that. Well, then you have to go through it again and again, because you might have like 29 values that you're like, yeah, I love these. Well, are you really living by 29 values? Right. So if you can dial it, right? You can dial it to like 3 to 5, and if you think, like, if somebody came up to you, put a gun to your head and said, you must give up this value. If you're at the point where like, no, I'd actually die for that value because it's so critical and foundation to how I live and what I believe, then you've got your core values. And when you act and move in life in alignment with those core values, that's fulfillment. And sometimes fulfillment doesn't feel great. Again, going back to the entrepreneur, like when I'm having a sales call with a potential client, and like even a coaching client, like one of my gifts is seeing potential in people. And this materializes in real estate too. Like, I just see potential, whether it's a house that needs flipping or whatever. I see potential. And so sometimes I get so discouraged when I meet with a client, I see their potential, but they don't either see it themselves or I haven't communicated well enough to help them get excited about it. And so it's really a deficiency in me in that moment. But I get so frustrated. I don't feel good. But when I can go back to what are my core values, and I can still be fulfilled in that moment, even though it doesn't feel good, because it is alignment with being able to serve other people and helping other people see their potential, even when they don't. So that's when I say I feel like you're in journey.
Oh yeah,
of
this is
fulfillment.
helping.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
So
Listen.
can I-
Go ahead, Amit.
All right. Yeah. So I just want to get a little clarification on that. So I know we're talking about like the fulfillment piece and getting clarity. I know clarity is always like the first step. And so you talked about like the value activity. What's like the next step? Like, so let's say you do the value activity, you've narrowed it down to the 5, and then we're kind of talking about action a little bit, and just so that we're defining or we're interpreting that our actions appropriately, that's aligned with like the clarity piece. Like, I guess what would be the next steps?
So the next easy step, but it's not quite the right one yet, is you start looking at your day. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this task. And maybe it's not in alignment or it's not, so then you start eliminating tasks or shifting things around. But there's one step before that. What are the big rocks, goals, projects, dreams that all of these things fall under? Because there is, I think it was about 4 years ago or 3 years ago, it was right after COVID started. And I started meeting with a marketing / business coach, because every good coach should also be coached. And she helped me recognize over a series of about 6 to 7 months that I had way too many things too many plates spinning. And I was getting frustrated because I'm like, why is nothing working? Well, it's because it was a shotgun approach and my energy was dispersed over way too many things. And so as I became clear on where do I feel like I'm gifted, the experiences and the skill sets that I've developed, the impact I want to have and create in my family, in myself, in my community, in the world, I had to get clear on those things. And then I started to recognize like, oh, that thing that I was kind of working, I was thinking I was like, that actually doesn't make sense. So you have to really streamline and make sure all of the big things that you're focused on actually matter. And then you can start trickling down to some of the, how do you spend your day? What are you focused on? And that sort of thing. So it's the big picture first.
All right. We are getting into some meat and potatoes right now. This is what, see, Dr. Sheri, this is why you're here. You're here to straighten all of us out. Not us, but all the audience. I mean, this is some really, really, really good stuff. And this is like really high value. So, all right. Now, right, I call it the 7 plate theory of what you were going through, which is having 7 delicious plates in front of you and you don't know which one to eat first, or you even start eating, you eating a little bit of here, a little bit there, a little bit there, but at the end of the day all the plates are still full because you can't eat all of them, right? So I think a ton of people suffer from that. So like, what are some of the actual things you did to get clear? Like, how did you say, man, I have a lobster here, I have filet mignon here, I have salmon here, I have bronzini here? Like, how did you say, I'm going to eat the filet today? Like, what did you do to get focused?
Great question. There's a lot of things that go into it. Certainly one of the things is paying attention to your energy. When you are doing something or trying to move something forward and you're just like depleted of energy, you don't look forward to it. And you just notice that your energy around it, the way you talk about it is not expanding, but rather it's like contracting you. I won't say that's 100% means that you should cut it off and move on, but it is an indicator that that thing really needs some attention. Is it worth keeping? Is this a moment? Is this a period of growth where you just need to grow through it? Or is this something that you need to move out of? In the high performance coaching, which is trained by Brendan Burchard, he's got a lot of amazing frameworks. Absolutely love him. He's so full of wisdom and knowledge. He has a framework in which I use in my coaching around how to make decisions on whether you keep something or whether you're not. And it's actually just a questionnaire. There's like, I think maybe like 15 questions to ask yourself and there's a rating, and it is quite robust, and it really helps you dial in all the different things that factor into should this be something you continue. So energy is one. Another example, which is something that for some reason I hadn't naturally paid attention to. What is the opportunity cost of doing that thing? So if I really pursue this thing that is draining my energy, it's costing you in other areas of your life. And one of the most significant areas of my life that I felt like was an opportunity cost as I was doing some of these things was my kids. I have 4 kids. As of today, they're 12, 14, and 15. They require a lot of me and a lot of my patience and energy. But when I was so stressed trying to do all of these things, I was not as available and present with my kids. And going back to values, if I screw up and fail in business for the rest of my life, I'm okay with that as long as I don't screw up and fail with my kids. They will always come first. And so it was that clarity that I was putting some of these, these activities and these values over my ability to be the kind of mom that I want to be. And so those are just a couple of the different metrics to ask yourself, questions to ask yourself and then measure on in deciding, I've got these 5 things I'm doing. I feel like I can't manage all of them. Something's got to go. Take this assessment for all 5 of those things and figure out, and there will be a number at the end that can kind of help you scale. It's from 1 to 100. Do I have 100 in this thing and 40 in this thing? Yep, the 40 thing probably has got to go.
I mean, that's super powerful. I'm just thinking in my head as just the wheels are turning as you're talking as far as opportunity cost. So I walked away from my W-2. I worked 18 years. It really, the main purpose was so that I could spend more time with my family. As I began this journey of entrepreneurship, what ended up happening is I ended up spending even more time than I did in my W-2. And so now I'm really thinking about okay, I'm trying to do this time study around, okay, so I have these couple different ventures going on. Something has to give because I can't do it all and still do the main thing, which was spend time with my kids and to coach and kind of be, like you said, be present, because recently I feel like I've been extra drained with regards to being present with my kids. And that's been the whole purpose. So I'm doing all these trips and I'm having fun, but I'm like, okay. But then I'm feeling a little bit of fatigue around, okay, why am I not moving forward in my business ventures?
So hopefully my internet is good right now.
Speak to me, help.
Hey, come on, Dr. Sheri. We're here. Come on. Lay it on us.
So what I would tell you, Omid, is that what you're experiencing is so common among entrepreneurs. Because I think the reason we get into entrepreneurship often is there's this personality type that wants to go big or go home. And we see opportunity everywhere. We're like, ooh, I could see how that could. Ooh, I could see how that could too. And sometimes being a good entrepreneur is more about saying no than about saying yes. And so what I would offer you, as I would offer any of your listeners, I would be so happy to sit down for 90 minutes and work through that challenge with you to help you get some clarity so that as you go forward, you have more confidence in the decisions that you're making.
Oh, that's great. I know it's a very complicated question that can't be answered 2 minutes. So, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think a deep dive would make sense. And that way you can kind of figure out the clarity piece and that its actions are aligning.
Yeah.
Dr. Sheri, let me tell you something. I'm loving this today. So okay. I'm telling you this right now. I can't wait to get off this. I'm gonna tell my wife. She thinks I'm crazy half the time, but
you probably are. But that's okay.
But listen, I'm really appreciating what you're bringing to the table here, because a lot of people don't want to talk about this. It's not the sexy thing to talk about, right? Things to talk about is on Instagram. Like, what kind of car are you going to buy, right? Like, what's that next house you're going to purchase? How much cash flow are you flowing, on those properties? And they're not talking about all the traumas, right, or the things that we face, I don't know, we call it behind the scenes, I guess, on a daily every single day. So if you could tell us more, tell us some, you're a high performance coach. You speak to a bunch of different people. What are some of the most common things that you ran into with some of the individuals that you coach that you can share here on our network?
Honestly, the biggest single challenge that we run into is exactly what Omid talked about, and that is what most people call work-life balance.
Yep.
But quite frankly, I think the fact that we even call it balance is part of the problem. Because when I think about balance, I think of one of those like old legal scales where you have something over here, something over here, and it's like they need to be equal. So I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
how is my work going to be equal to my family life? It's never going to be if you measure it like in time spent or things like that. It's more about alignment. How can I make sure that my work and my family life are in alignment, that they're all working together, that it's all on the same page, same goals? My husband also is an entrepreneur. We literally for the last 4 years have both worked out of our house, and
Mhm.
so like what he does and what I do, I want to make sure that that's in alignment. And then how we raise our kids and how my kids are involved in kind of what we're doing, that also needs to be in alignment. I want to make sure they understand, why is mom working sometimes when they want me to sit down and watch a movie? But then sometimes when I want to work, because I love it, sometimes I'm like, you know what? They need me present. So I'm just going to go watch that movie, even though while I'm watching that movie, I'm thinking, I could be doing this other thing. It feels more productive. But I recognize being there, sitting on the couch with my kids is something that matters to them.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Sheri, with that, what you just said. I mean, 'cause
Yes.
that is it right there, right? Is that you in your computer, you see something that you're doing, your kid's like tugging at you, so you go and you be with them. Now, are you really with them? Or is your head still thinking about that computer and what you should? So when you in that moment, I think that that's a real thing, right? Like, what do? Do you be present? Because you're not present with your kids, right? Like, you're physically there, but you're mentally in your office, right? You're just
Yes.
waiting for the time to go past. Like, what's the help or advice that you could provide to actually be present with your kids at that time?
Absolutely. Being real, it's a journey. There are times that I am not present mentally, but I am physically. But I know that that's happening, and I aspire to be the mom that is 100% present. And so the more that I am clear on how I want to be, then I can work on those actions being that way. And so it's a process. It's a transformation process that I have not fully achieved, and maybe never. But every day I can be a little bit better, and I can be a little bit more present. So it's not an all or nothing. It's just, let's continue to do the hard thing and to work on it.
Take it one day at a time.
One day at a time.
No, I think that's great. I think it's the presence piece is something that I've been trying to work on, and I know high performers in general, sometimes the relationships that they have, sometimes they get put in the back burner, and whether that's outside of the family unit, and so I'm just trying to be more present with like those that I'm around when I'm around them. What I know, like I do the like time blocking of like 6 to 8, like in theory, this is what I'm supposed to do, which is, don't pick up your phone, you're present during dinner, but there's always exceptions. Are there any other little like tips that you can give people that are like best practices that people can kind of work on?
Yeah. So I'll stick with the being present and the alignment with family and work. You
Yeah.
don't have to be perfect, and your kids don't need you to be perfect. So what I found and what I'm really working hard on is when if one of my kids comes in here and says, "Hey, I want you to do this thing," like maybe it's one of my daughters saying, "Hey, mom, I want you to braid my hair," just a precious moment. But I'm like right in the middle of something. instead of just saying no, go away, I might be like, "Oh, I would love to braid your hair right now. I really need to finish this thing. Give me 5 minutes and then I will make time for you." So it's verbalizing my thought process, verbalizing the decision making to my kids, because I am then educating and training them so that when they are in a moment where they're challenged as an adult, I've already kind of taught them about trying to make decisions. And so that's what I would say is when you're feeling frustrated or torn or not sure you're making the right decision, if you can verbalize that and share those emotional challenges with your kids, they're going to give you a lot more grace, and you're going to feel your relationship strengthen with them, which is the whole point of all of this. So having that vulnerability with them, I think, is a really important foundation.
Man, that is like, yes, it is. You know, I just would add that if your kid is younger, make sure that you give them a realistic time, because if you tell them 5 minutes, I'm telling you, they're going to be back in 5 minutes saying, hey,
So
it's been
true.
5 minutes. I'm ready. So just be a little more realistic. Like, hey, give me an hour or give me 30 minutes, because they're going to be back. You know, but one of the things that, also just as a tip that has worked for me with my son anyway, is I budget the time in. So I go seek him, right?
Yeah.
So he don't even know that I'm saying, hey, from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I'm gonna go find him. I'm gonna be in his world regardless if he likes it or not. So if he's
That's
playing
good.
the video games with his friends over the internet, I'm yelling in the background, act like I got a game. Yeah, I'm black guy in the back, you know, and like, they hate it, but it's all just kind of being there, being present. So I found that sometimes that works as well as an added bonus of kind of filtering it in and
Yeah.
and blocking as much time as possible. We had a guest on a while back, and we was all going back and forth about the time blocking thing, not the time blocking thing, the work balance thing, right? Like, it really doesn't exist, in like the little bit of success I am having is time blocking, right? Is just saying, hey, all right, I know my son's going to be here during this time, so I'm going to, be there. It's like when a baby was born, right? You try to sleep on their time, right? So when they're sleeping, you like, you know what? They're going to go sleep in. I'm going to get a nap in as well. So when they do wake up, I'm fully energized. So I kind of took that there. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, is that something good? I'm on to something. I'm not. Trash it. Like, come on, Dr. Jerry, we need this.
I love the fact that you seek out your son. I think that is genius, because it shows that you are tuned in and you're pursuing him as much as he's pursuing you. There is one additional tip that I would share that I think is super helpful. If anybody has ever heard of this book, it's super popular. It has been The 5 Love Languages. It breaks down the different ways that we can demonstrate our care, affection, and love for somebody. And what matters to me may not matter to my husband as much, or may not matter to my kids. So when we think about how the ultimate goal is, how can I make sure my kids or my family are feeling loved and cared for? And they may not actually care about quality time as much as you do. Maybe it's about acts of service. So maybe if you, helped your kid clean up the room, that might actually matter to them more than some other, quality time. So there's a lot of different free assessments online. There's even one catered to kids. So I would encourage everybody to look that up, because you can better understand what your family needs from you from their perspective. Then you can be more efficient with what you're actually doing or giving them.
Can I ask a quick question real quick, Omi? Just ask a quick. Is being an
Yeah.
ATM an act of service? Like, they just come over and they kind of punch you up, boop, 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 and put their hand out for money?
Great question. It could be, but I would challenge you on that.
All right, go ahead, Omi. I just had to throw that out there.
I love the love languages. I think for myself and my wife, we have very different love languages. And, I'm a words of affirmation. I'm a quality time. She's the acts of service. And so her thing is always, what have you done for me lately? That's like, for me, that's like the lowest on my, so I'm like, hey, I said this nice thing to you. I spent this time with you. She doesn't care, right? Her thing is like, Did you rub my feet? Did you give me a back rub? No. And, I don't like doing those things. So, but I know that I have to be mindful. But I think applying it to your children, that is genius, because I got to figure that out. I haven't done that with my children, and maybe they don't want quality time. I feel like I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, there's definitely one of my kids for sure. He could care less. And so I'm like, maybe I got to re-strategize my opportunity cost here and do it somehow differently. So I think that's amazing advice. So, I mean, we love to have you on, another time to kind of continue the conversation. So maybe could you define, like, what does find your freedom mean to you?
For me, find my freedom is really living a life, as Lenny talked about, that is fulfilling. Because if it's fulfilling, then it typically doesn't feel like work. It's fun. There's, didn't talk about joy, but there's a joy that comes with that. And the joy is in the journey. It's not in necessarily the outcome. And so freedom for me is knowing that I get to get up every day. I get to serve powerfully. I get to engage with amazing people right here. And I get to have conversations that truly matter. For me, that's freedom.
All right, Dr. Sheri, let me tell you something. You're cool. You're fun. You're super smart. You're personal. People can connect with you. And honestly, after this episode, a lot of people should. So with that being said, how can they get in contact with you?
So honestly, I mean, I got Facebook and I got all that stuff. But what's even most important is to have a one-on-one conversation, because that's where the power comes. And so I would be delighted to any of the listeners to have a 90-minute strategy session, completely complimentary to you. It's my gift to you from Omid and Lenny as well. So it's my website, drsherifluellen.com, drsherifluellen.com. And there's a green button that says book a free strategy call. Do that and make sure that you put in the notes that you heard me here, because I want to make sure that Omid and Lenny understand the true impact that this podcast is having.
Boom, boom, boom. All right. Now, make sure you get in contact with Dr. Sheri. I know I am, because she's amazing. So, Sheri, what we like to do is we like to do this big boom session at the end. All right. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count to 3, 1, 2, 3 in a uniform manner. We're going to say boom as loud as we can. The objective here is to bust some speakers. So can you help us do that?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Let's do it. All right. On 3. Let me clear my throat. All right. 1, 2, 3. Boom! Awesome. Check this out. Man, today's episode really touched me. I don't really get into the love language thing, but today was my definitely love language. Fulfillment, clarity, purpose, meaning, and joy. What else is life's about? That sums up everything. Listen, I'm not saying this just to say this because we have our new friend here on our network. I'm saying this because she brings an absolute value. I'm highly encouraging you to reach out for the free, for just us, for just listening to this podcast, this free 90-minute session with her, because believe me, the one-on-one, which I can't wait to have mine. The one-on-one is definitely going to blow your mind. Now, we need you to listen to this episode. We also need you to give us an honest 5-star review, because this is how we bring on more guests just like Dr. Sheri, and that's our goal, and that's our plan. Also, we need you to share this. We need you to share this with everyone in your Rolodex, your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle. Share it with all your coworkers, the ones that you like and the ones that you don't. Until the next episode of Find Your Freedom, we talk to you soon. Peace.
Thanks for listening to Find Your Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, please help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review and sharing the podcast with friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, get out there and find your freedom.